About the safety of the country. They're also worried about their own safety, as we were just talking about, maybe now more than ever before. Just over the last several years, it feels like it's been one incident after another. In 2017, GOP Steve Scalise was shot during a congressional baseball practice. 3 years later, several men attempted to kidnap Michigan's Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer, and 9 men were eventually convicted in that plot. Then in 2021, there was the January 6th attack on the Capitol. 2022, a man looking for then Speaker Nancy Pelosi broke into Pelosi's home, beat her husband in the head with the hammer. Those kinds of attacks, they really started to accelerate in 2024. There were 2 assassination attempts on President Trump, first in June, then a few months later. The DNC offices in Arizona were shot up in October. Then in December, United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson was shot dead in Manhattan, the accused killer Luigi Mangione. This year alone, we have seen a number of incidents as well. Teslas set on fire in March, the RNC headquarters attacked in New Mexico, an arson attack at the home of Pennsylvania Democratic Governor Josh Shapiro, the killing of Minnesota state lawmaker and her husband, and then yesterday, the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Let's break this down a little bit more with Luke Baumgartner. He is a research fellow at the program of Extremism at George Washington University. Thanks so much for being with us, Luke. We've seen political violence in the past, and even more violence at some times in this country's history, and yet I can't help feeling like this day, with social media, there is a whole different level of heightened tension, heightened emotion. By now, so many people have seen those horrific moments for themselves over and over and over again. And they're also seeing, at the exact same time, anger and rage and heartbreak and hatred. It feels very overwhelming. But where do you see this going in the foreseeable future?
Well, Gotti, first, thanks for having me on. And I just want to say that at the end of the day, violence begets more violence. So anybody could use this or any other act of violence that we've seen that you just mentioned in the past few years as a justification to carry out what they see as something that's justified to get their point across.
Yeah, it does seem like violence, especially in this case and in other cases, it's somewhat contagious. Charlie Kirk, he seemed a champion, fighting for convictions through debate, not silencing those who thought differently. And he did so in that kind of town hall format that he would take to college campuses. It became very, very popular. Do you think that we're still going to see those?
Gotti, that's a really tough call. And, with what just happened with Charlie Kirk, I wouldn't be surprised if people like him or other political influencers who are very prominent, especially with the younger crowd on college campuses, I wouldn't be surprised if they're a little more cautious and a little more apprehensive about going to these sorts of events where they're ultimately exposed.
And we don't know the motive. And we do know that Charlie Kirk dove headfirst into so many political controversies of today. But what is going to happen if this does turn out to be motivated by a very specific ideology? Take your pick. We've seen all kinds of different motivations for mass shooters and for people that have perpetrated violence over the last few months, right? But if there is one specific one, regardless of what it is, what ends up happening in this ecosystem?
Well, in the ecosystem that we see today, especially the echo chamber of social media, a lot of times false narratives get, recycled and repackaged over and over again. So misinformation spreads. And when that happens, what we see is people jumping to conclusions and thinking that, oh, this must be right. And because the assassin or the attacker fits a certain mold or has a certain ideology, that'll just reinforce the worldview of people who are calling for retribution, for revenge, or for something of, a retaliation to what they see as something that was unjustified and unacceptable. Or even, on the flip side, you'll see it as justification for other people to go out and commit a similar act of violence. At the end of the day, all you need is somebody with a gun and a grievance to find one social media post and use that as their spark or their clarion call to answer.
There are a lot of people across the country right now that are worried about their loved ones and how much time they are probably spending looking at a lot of this stuff. Is there any anecdote that you've found in your studies that can pull somebody back from being radicalized by radical ideologies?
First, I would say, having a tight-knit support system of, family, friends, somebody within your faith community, whatever that might be, or a hobby. Typically, those sorts of things will get you away from the phone, away from the screens, and away from a lot of the material that drives people to this sort of violence in the first place. And I think a second thing is especially social media content moderation policies have taken a nosedive, especially as of late. If there are better mechanisms in place that social media companies can put into place, then they should. But at the end of the day, they're going to look out for their bottom line and for creating shareholder value and placing that over the needs of public safety.
Luke, research fellow at George Washington University, really appreciate your insight into all this. I think it's spot on. Thanks so much for joining us. So what does this shocking assassination mean for the GOP? I do want to talk to